Hi and welcome to the first in a series of World of Warcraft versus Elder Scrolls Online. This is a series someone suggested some time ago, finally getting around to do, mostly for Patreon here, but I'm going to be uploading it on YouTube within a week after doing that. And it's all about the differences between the games. It's not about saying which one I think is best in each particular case, just how they are in each game. You can come to a conclusion yourself on which is better. In this first one, we're going to be looking at crafting professions specifically. That is, professions that are there to craft you gear for your character. So if we have a look at crafting in ESO first of all, so we've got, for gear that you can craft the usual things: cloth, armor, leather armor at a clothing station like this, metal armor, as well as weapons at the blacksmiths, and then shields and wooden weapons at the woodworkers. So these are the three we're going to look at. So we access a clothing station. First of all, these are the raw materials. You need so much of these to process them. They're all red at the moment because I don't have enough of these to process. Different things on the tab here. So I could create an item. So let's say I wanted to create a cloth robe and I wanted to create it at a particular level. Let's say level 28, 30 say. I could craft that. I can also decide on a particular style. So you have these stones that give you particular styles that you will have learnt. You have to, again, acquire the knowledge to learn these, and that determines what it's actually going to look like. And then finally there's traits. Now I'll explain in a moment how we acquire the traits, but I can put traits on it, like critical resistance here, for example, reducing the cost of rolling, dodging, sprinting. This one is always the great one for when you're leveling, because it increases experience that you gain from kills, and so on. There's various traits here we can add to it as well. And you craft your item. So let's say we craft this. Now the next thing I could do is I could improve it. So obviously at the moment this isn't looking particularly impressive. So I can use other reagents which I acquire elsewhere to improve the quality of it, to get it to green quality. Baseline at the moment, because of my skill, is 50% with this, but I can use two of them to make sure it's a guaranteed increase, and I could use that. And I could improve it still further, so it's like blue quality, and then eventually I could do it to purple quality and yellow quality, the legendary quality, as long as I'm willing to use these increasingly rare materials to do so. Now, the other things we can do in terms of getting experience, we can see my experience bar in the top left. As I craft things, of course, that increases. But also, when I've got any gear, it doesn't have to be crafted gear. It can be gear that I've just picked up, and I don't want that gear. I can what's called deconstruct it. So if I deconstruct these leather boots, for example, I will get some materials. And then the other thing we can do is research. Now, the way I get these traits, which I showed you here in terms of putting special abilities onto it, is through research. I find a piece of gear, let's say a cloth robe. At some point, I found a cloth robe with the impenetrable trait on it. And by researching it, so I consume that cloth robe, I can't use it afterwards, but I'm not breaking it down for raw materials, I'm researching it, I can work out how to use that trait on that item. Now, that doesn't cover me for everything. So on boots, for example, you can see I've got loads of traits there, but they're different ones to cloth robes, because I've obviously come across a greater range of cloth boots that have various traits on them. So what you do, I can see here, for example, that I have a belt that has this one. It says researchable. So I choose to research that, which means that I will then be able to make cloth belts that have that trait. Now you can see here it's going to take over 2 days for this. As you research more and more things, the time it takes to do this increases. And then patterns is a new thing, or newish thing, to do with creating things for player housing. So we also have this aspect of crafting as well. But if I go back to the item I've just made here, this cotton robe, it doesn't look that impressive. Okay, sure, it's got an armor value on it, and you know, I can increase my experience from using it, but it doesn't really have anything else. If we look at what I've currently got equipped, I can see there's extra things here. For example, I've got set bonuses. I'm wearing some gear with set bonus. If I wear 2 pieces from the same set, I'm getting extra magicka, which is one of my resources. On a 3 set bonus, I've got magicka recovery, so increases the rate at which I recover it. 4 set spell damage, and I've even got a 5 set there. So where do I come across these? Oh, well, you know, come across them in dungeons, things like that, do I? No, I craft them. So where do we go to get these special set items? Well, if we look on the map, this special symbol here, each zone has at least one of these special crafting locations. And different ones have different set bonuses attached to them. So you have to go to specific places to craft the set that you want. So for example, if I wanted to make myself a new stave. Now we can see the one I have here has a set bonus on it, but let's say I wanted to make one with these particular set bonus. So I make myself, let's say, a lightning staff. And I want to make it, for my particular level, 130. Now you can see this particular set bonus means if I have 2 of these items, it gives me weapon crit. If I have 3 of them, even more weapon crit. 4 of them, weapon damage, and so they're all different set bonuses here. But the interesting thing is to be able to craft them. You can see here it says I need 5 traits. So the fact that I have learned 5 traits for this particular weapon means I can craft it at this station. But let's say there were a weapon where I hadn't learned that many traits. Okay, so this one, for example, there are other weapons that I could in theory craft. If I just switch to normal weapons, you can see this huge range of weapons that is possible to craft with blacksmithing. But when I switch to these special set weapons, there's only 3 that I'm able to craft, because those are the only 3 for which I know the 5 trait minimum. So generally speaking, the more desirable sets that you want to craft require that you have done more research. Now when it comes to gathering, anyone can gather reagents. You don't need any particular skill for it. Over there's someone nicking an ore that would have been more useful to me. Great, thanks very much. Over here, I can see some wood. Now, you'll see them glowing. That's because I have particular skill so that I can see them more clearly. It becomes more distinct if I get within a certain range of it. But the important point to note is you do not need any special skill to be able to actually harvest any of these things. Most crafting nodes that you'll find are level appropriate for you. So this voidstone ore that I found, for example, is very useful for crafting at the level my blacksmithing is. It's not normally what you would have expected to find in this zone before scaling came to the game, because this is the first major zone you would come across. So it's a low level one. So when you're out gathering, you will generally find nodes for the items that are at the highest level you can craft. But you will also occasionally find ones that are more associated with the level of the zone. But it can make it a little bit tricky to actively farm the lower level materials. In terms of where you get things from, for woodworking you find wood nodes such as this one here. You also get cloth from nodes, and you get metal from nodes as well. Leather comes from actually killing mobs, and you automatically loot it from them. One of the most amazing features of especially gathering in Elder Scrolls Online, however, I will point out this only applies to people who pay the subscription. There is a free-to-play model for which you will not get this facility, is the crafting bag. Now, if I look at my inventory, you can separate this into different sections here. In terms of materials, if I look in materials, all there is are these mimic stones. We get these off the online store. More about that later on in the series. But all of the things I've been gathering aren't in here. So where are they? Well, they're not in my inventory at all. They automatically go into what's called the crafting bag, which is limitless. So you don't have to worry about picking up potentially crafting reagents that you probably won't get around to using. Who the hell cares? It's completely limitless. It's shared by all of the characters on your account as well. So anything I gather on this character, if I wanted to craft something on another character, they've got access to it too. So it's just a case of gather what you can, gather everything, get all of the reagents that you can, and then you've got access to them in your crafting bag whenever you need them. They're not clogging up your normal inventory space. They're not clogging up your bank space. They're free to use on any character whenever you want. So in terms of how we improve our skill in a particular profession, we spend skill points. Now, you have skill points to spend on your character. It is possible to spend lots of skill points on professions, such as blacksmithing here, and you could spend it on all of your professions and become really good at all the professions, but then you'd have fewer skill points to spend on say your class abilities or weapon abilities, armor abilities, and so on. So there's always this choice. You've got so many skill points, which of course you can acquire more by doing more of the content, and it's your choice how you spend them. So for blacksmithing, for example, I have spent 9 skill points in being able to get through the different levels of blacksmithing. I can't spend the 10th point until I've got to level 50 blacksmithing, which I'm at the moment 43. Where we show you how to gather, and you saw that some of the reagents were glowing for me, that is due to this key I. So I've spent full 3 points on it, which means that if I come within 40 meters of an ore node, then it will glow yellow and I can see it quite distinctly. If I don't have any of those, it's not that they're invisible, they're just harder to spot. Minor hireling, these are quite cunning. What this means, again, I've spent the full 3 trait points on that. What that means is every day I get mailed some reagent. So here we go, for example, and I've got that, as you can see, for a number of professions because I've spent them in different professions as well. Metal extraction increases the chances of me being able to get the more useful reagents when I deconstruct things that are made of metal. Metallurgy allows me to reduce the research time. So we noted there that as you research more and more, the time it takes to research an item gets longer and longer. So this is allowing me to reduce that time. Also allow me to research multiple things at once. By default, when you start off, you can research one thing at a time. I can research potentially 3 things at a time. And then temper expertise increases the chances of me being able to improve items. So what that basically means is the items I need to be able to improve an item that I craft, I need fewer of them. So that helps me with that one as well. Okay, and now for crafting in World of Warcraft as it is in the current expansion of Legion. When you want to craft something, for example, if we wanted to craft some laystone gauntlets here, we'll notice it's got basic stats on it. It will actually get secondary stats on it when we craft it, but those secondary stats are random. There are lots of different combinations of secondary stats we could get onto it. So if we wanted a particular one, we can't really determine that. All we can do is craft it lots and lots of times until we get the one we want. In terms of what we can do with the unwanted ones, we have 2 choices. We can either put it onto the auction house and hopefully sell it to someone, or in Legion what we can do is we can break it down into Obliterum. This won't get us any skill points for our crafting skill if we wanted it, but it allows us to get a useful resource that can be used to upgrade some of the crafted items. So that wouldn't apply to the item I broke down, ironically, but in terms of some of the other ones, they can be upgraded multiple times. You'll notice there are stars by each one. What these are is they allow you to craft the items with fewer materials. So it's a way of, as you become more experienced and more proficient with the craft of these individual items, you can do it with fewer materials, you can do it a little bit cheaper. Maybe you can get it to the point where economically it's viable to sell some of these. The downside to this is early days in an expansion, or when you've only just created a pattern, then you can create a situation where it's economical to sell them, you can make some gold. Later on in the expansion, as more people get to this level of proficiency, because it's quite straightforward to do, you'll find the market flooded with these items and it doesn't become cost efficient. It's almost always the case that you cannot sell the finished materials for more than the cost of the reagents. When it comes to gathering in World of Warcraft, we have the option of flying around most zones at most times, and we can see clearly on the mini-map where we've got gathering items. We can see what they are from some distance without actually even being able to see the item itself. However, unlike with Elder Scrolls Online, you can't gather on any character. You have to be able to select the ability, and you get a choice of 2 main professions. In this case, it's 2 gathering ones, mining and herbing. Just as with the crafting professions, there are ranks you can get in this as well, but those ranks determine, in this case, how many of the materials you get as you go around gathering. So it means that someone with more ranks in these items can get more of them when they do a circuit. One great benefit of gathering resources in World of Warcraft is, let's say you're stuck fighting a beastie like this and someone came along while I was fighting it and took that node, I would still be able to take it after them. Whenever someone taps a node, it always remains for another player for several seconds afterwards to prevent that sort of antisocial and frustrating gameplay. When it comes to storage of crafting materials, then you get them landing in your bags as with normal. There is a crafting bank part where you can automatically deposit all reagents. It will put them in there. It's limited in space, and it's not shared across your characters either. So you can't just put it into a central storage area usable by all of your characters. The nodes available in different zones are determined by the zone, although there is scaling now in the latest zones in World of Warcraft. If you want a particular resource, you have to go to the zone that is associated with it. Just with Elder Scrolls Online, sometimes you have to go out in the world to be able to craft certain things. In this case, if I want to craft any of my Demon Steel bars, then I need to go to a place in remote High Mountain. With Obliterum, you can upgrade the items up to, at the moment, 50 item levels above the base equipment, but it will bind it to you. And this is what prevents you simply being able to upgrade it to a suitable level, pass it on to another character. Unfortunately, that other character has to farm the soulbind items itself, which in reality means that, especially later on in an expansion, by the time that character has farmed enough of those soulbound items, they've probably acquired enough gear elsewhere that's better. As such, you could argue that the crafted gear after the first couple of months of an expansion in World of Warcraft are only useful for giving you a bit of a leg up to be able to access some of the content through which you can get the better gear, but you probably won't be taking advantage of upgrading all that crafted equipment. Now, with having to choose only two main primary professions, it could be a little bit restrictive, but fortunately there's a situation in the last couple of years now. Let's say one of your professions in a particular expansion you realise you weren't going to get any real use out of, but another profession would be very useful to you. So you can get rid of the old profession, get a new profession. Now, in the older days, you would have had to skill yourself all the way up to be able to make the useful patterns for your level. Now, this is largely not the case. The majority of patterns that you can make with as low as skill 1. There are a few small exceptions to this, but generally speaking, a lot of the useful gear can be crafted without particularly crafting skill. In terms of how useful the equipment is, for most players, unless they're getting the best gear from the raids and PvP, will be able to find a use for this, but it does require farming to skill it all the way up. It is not possible, for example, for me to simply craft one of these items, level it all the way up myself, and then pass it on to another character. They need some soulbound items called Blood of Sargeras to be able to craft it up themselves. So I hope you found that interesting. If you've got any comments, put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.